But without further ado, here we go. Dr. Chuck Williams, session 2.
Hey guys, thank you for participating in the groups, and I went around to several of them. I'm going to try to get to some of the rest of them, and boy, the conversations are really, really good. So you're right on it. You're doing the right thing there, and I think a lot of good things are being shared. So I appreciate I just appreciate you being frank and honest about what's going on with you. That really helps. I wanted to share something. I guess I got a little distracted up here in the last talk and didn't even use my PowerPoint here. So there was one thing I wanted you to be encouraged by that I did not use in the last talk, and this is it. So, married couples versus single or divorced couples. What are the advantages? All right. You live longer. This is all research, okay? You report greater happiness. You make more money, you have more sex. I'm telling you, I'll talk a little bit about that in the last session. You're physically healthier, you report greater satisfaction with life, you report more purpose in life, and you have better emotional and mental health. So that's the beauty of being in a marriage. Now, there are also some disadvantages, but those are opportunities to be better, right? That's how you have to think about it. Okay, so this time we're going to talk about becoming a team, moving from me to we, which is the hardest thing in a relationship to do because we spend all our time with ourselves. So who do we think about mostly? That's right. So when I met this girl at Clemson back years and years ago. I thought she was the prettiest thing I ever saw, and she was a very good person and very responsible and smart. And I was this frat boy who played in a rock and roll band on the weekends, and I had this grand total of, after a year and a half, of a grade point average of 1.7. Obviously, my lifestyle was not encouraging my success at school. But anyhow, we met, and I thought she was great. I don't know what she saw in me that I saw an awful lot in her. I thought I would try to change her from being so straight-laced. I didn't do that, obviously. And she didn't really try to change me either. I heard some of you talking about trying to change people or not trying to change people and just letting them become who they are. And the way that happens is your influence and God's influence on them helps them to become better people. And that's really what we're after in life. Some people make the mistake of trying to change somebody. People don't appreciate that, really. They may realize your good intentions, but if they're not ready or on board, they just don't change. But you can be an influence by being the person you are and being a better person. Usually, people will follow that if they see that it's a sincere motive. Anyhow, but in our case, we had, for whatever reason, in our relationship, we had synergy. And what that is our combined effect was better than our separate effect. If you've ever heard of 1 + 1 = 3, if you have synergy in your relationship, it's a powerful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And if when you become a Christian, you can be a better couple for God. And, that's what she helped me to do. She helped me want to be a better person. And that's what my relationship to God helped me to do, want to be a better person and to actually be empowered to do that. So Ephesians 5, 25 through 33 is a scripture all of you have read many times. You've heard it many times. It says, and I'll repeat just the gist of it rather than the whole thing. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. He who loves his wife loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So the idea here is if you know how you're loved by Christ, you can share that love. All right? Now, interestingly enough, if a woman feels like you're loving her as much or more than you love yourself, that must is going to be a want to, all right? And I've always struggled with that particular scripture. I'm not exactly sure why they use must respect your husband. It seems like a command when it ought to be just an automatic cause-effect response, right? because that's really what we're after. We want, just like Christ loved us, we want our spouses, and particularly husbands for our wives, to know that we love them so much that we'll do whatever, we'll make whatever sacrifices we need to make. And that is, in effect, when it talks about the mystery of marriage. I mean, that's the profound mystery in marriage, is that very thing, when we realize that Christ so loved us that he gave himself for us. And when we do that, and that's really what he was after. I want you to see that the profound mystery in marriage is you're giving yourselves to each other and putting that person first and making those sacrifices. And it will reward you because of that sacrifice. I've always wondered what that profound mystery was, but it is that motivation to want to be your best for each other. So in the initial stages of marriage, we have to learn to consider the other person before ourselves in the spirit of Philippians 2. A man and his ever-nagging wife went on vacation to Jerusalem. While they were there, the wife passed away. The undertaker told the husband, "You can have her shipped home for $5,000, or you can bury her here in the Holy Land for $150. The man thought about it and told him he would have her shipped home instead. The undertaker asked, "Well, why would you spend $5,000 to ship your wife home? It would be wonderful to have her buried here, and you'd only spend $150. The man replied, "Well, long ago, a man died here, was buried here, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead." I just can't take that chance. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. Is we're going to be talking about conflict here, okay? And all right, there are three types of conflicts, okay? And we're going to talk about conflicts that bring you closer. But there are three fundamental types. You've all heard them before. It's conflict avoidance, it's destructive conflict, and it's constructive conflicts. So, conflict avoidance, I'm going to read you a little story of a couple that I saw once, and I'll start off with that. Joe and Connie were a late 30s couple who had been married for 12 years and were the epitome of what others might describe as happy. They were easygoing, accommodating, rarely if ever argued, and seemed to handle life well. No one would know that part of the reason for their outward success in their marriage was that they didn't face issues. They went along to get along and never made waves. Whenever a potential conflict occurred, they would drop it quickly. Their love life had cooled down as well. The conflict avoidance was like undetected high blood pressure, a silent killer. One day, out of the blue, Connie discovered that Joe had been soliciting women online. He admitted to having several trysts with random partners he had met on various internet sites, just for the excitement of it all. So, if you look at those three conflict styles, you might think that at first glance that the destructive conflict is the worst thing you could do, right? But that's not true. Conflict avoidance is the worst thing you can do in the long run, because like high blood pressure, you might unexpectedly have a stroke and you're either disabled or dead. All right, so what happens when things get swept under the rug is people become more and more dissatisfied, and it dampens the feelings they have for them, and they usually are replaced by resentment. And people will then start looking for excitement elsewhere, whether it be in their work or the things they do or someone else even. And that's what happened here. Now, the interesting thing about destructive conflict is you know that it happened, okay? It's not as if you were unaware that it occurred. Now, you may not have handled it well, and so that idea is go find a way to solve how you interact, and don't just stay at this impasse, because you've been warned by the fact that it's not working well. And some people keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. Ever heard that one? Yeah. So anyhow, constructive conflict is really sitting down, figuring out we have this idea, this difference in ideas or difference in expectations or desires, and we need to find a solution to it. So how do we do that rather than just continuing to butt heads? And that's really what we're going to talk about here today. How do you turn your conflicts into constructive conflicts? Okay? So what causes fights and arguments among us? Now, there's a scripture I'm going to read that basically starts off in a minute about that. But if you look up what issues commonly cause conflicts among couples, if you look it up on the internet, it'll flash it all up there and you'll see it. Money. Let me get onto that one. Let's see if I can. Well, somehow I missed it. Oh, well. Anyhow, yeah, there it is. Is that it? Yes, money. The division of labor at home, that's a common one. Time management. Trust issues even. Self-centeredness. Sex. Children and teens, particularly teens. Yeah. And they're just testing everything out. That's what they're doing. They're trying to become independent adults and, driving us totally crazy when they do it. Stress and fatigue, miscommunication. So these are things that everyone faces. Now, if you approach these issues by saying, I want to get rid of these issues, you will be doing that the rest of your life, okay? So just accept the fact that no matter what stage you're in, these are the kinds of things that are going to be happening. So it's not about eliminating these, it's about managing them, okay? So I'm going to give you, a little quote here that I love. Some people create their own storms and are surprised when it rains. But I want to give you a conceptual kind of framework to think about how conflicts occur. All right, and I want you to, if you don't take anything out of here today, this is what I'd love for you to take out, because it's going to give you a way to approach any conflict you have and manage yourself through it, okay? So in cognitive behavior therapy, there is something called the cognitive triangle. So issues in life cause these things, okay? Most of us, when we have a problem, we feel the emotions. We're aware of the fact that we're already hot, or we're upset, or we're frustrated, or we become impatient. And emotions always trigger reactions, okay? But that's not where it all started. And that's what we have to understand. We didn't just start off with our emotions. They may be the strongest thing that we recognize at the moment, but we start with our thoughts. Okay, we start with what we're thinking, and we may not even have realized that we have some stinking thinking going on, as AA calls it, okay? We may be thinking wrongly about things. So let me read James. So it's James 1 through 10, and it says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, but you don't get it. You kill and covet," and maybe you don't kill here, but I mean, you might do some other things that hurt other people. "But you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and you fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. And when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred toward God? Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or don't you think the scripture says without reason that the spirit he caused to live in us tends toward envy, but he gives us more grace? This is why the scripture says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. So, the thoughts we have, we want something, but we don't get it. Okay? We feel wronged, all right? And when you feel wrong, it's real easy to feel real self-righteous in reacting to somebody else, isn't it? We think we deserve more, don't we? We want more respect. We want more money. We want more credit. We want more sex, more status, more money. Our pride takes over. I mean, that's just human nature, right? And the question is, of course, how does this happen for us personally? We want what other people have. We're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, and it makes us discontent. We've been negatively influenced by the world, by what the world thinks is important. And so we want more, clearly. So just how much is enough? Does anybody know? A little bit more. That's human nature. What is enough is just a little bit more. We think we're right, just like I was thinking I was right when I was first married, because I was Mr. Perfect, of course. And we don't give room for the other people to be right too. So it's win-lose. That kind of position with anyone is win-lose, as opposed to can we both be better if we can find out what really is right about that. We say one thing and then we do something else, revealing what is really important to us. We tell people what they want to hear and not what we really think. And that's what this scripture is talking about here. We value what the world values. And it's so easily in our world today to be seduced by that philosophy. Okay? What does worldly wisdom value? Looks, intelligence, talent, wealth, status, right? Those are all things we want. And those aren't bad in and of themselves, but that's really what the motivation of the world puts as a priority. So what is godly wisdom? What does godly wisdom value? Character, a pure heart, loving others before ourselves, honesty, humility, generosity, commitment, gratitude. So Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. So our thoughts, going back to this triangle that I was discussing a little bit ago, is these thoughts determine our destiny. So the idea here is we, according to 2 Corinthians 10:5, is we need to take control, captive is what the scriptures say, every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So doing an evaluation of how we think sometimes is the solution to solving conflicts, because we don't always think real well. I mean, all of us get into these places where our thoughts are not what they need to be. And so what do thoughts do? They cause feelings. And the feelings that they cause, if you follow that consistent trend, is they cause things like anger. If we're feeling hurt, hurt people, right? That's human nature. If somebody hurts us, we want to hurt them back. I mean, none of us can avoid that. That's just our first impulse. But thoughts cause feelings. Issues cause thoughts, and they may be constructive thoughts, they may be destructive thoughts, they may be unhealthy thoughts. But thoughts cause feelings, and those feelings like anger and anxiety and fear, hurt, worry, resentment, envy, jealousy, all those things come out. And then what we know is that feelings trigger actions, all right? They trigger actions. We say things we don't mean. We do things that are a response to that emotion that it overwhelms us, and we get ourselves into all kinds of problems. And, we make matters worse, and we've got two people who are, caught up into this problem. And so, our solution is to make sure and we have to check that our thoughts are pure and healthy, constructive, given the benefit of the doubt, not judging other people, jumping to conclusions, positive, assuming the best. So 1 John 2:16 says, everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, the boasting of what we have and what we do or have done, comes not from the Father, from the world. So, what are God's solutions to resolving conflicts spiritually? Okay, all right, let's see. There's the behaviors, the feelings we have that trigger actions. Those can be behaviors that are constructive or destructive, reactive, retaliation. They're cause and effect responses. So the next one, the solutions. It says, make sure our thoughts are healthy, constructive, giving the benefit of the doubt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let me move on here. And there's the 2 Corinthians 10:5. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. God's solution to resolving conflicts. If you look back at that James 1 through 10, verses 7 through 10 say this. They say, submit yourselves to God. Are we thinking of God when these conflicts erupt? Most of us are not. We're thinking that we've been hurt. It shifts us right out of our spiritual perspective, doesn't it? All right, so what it's saying is submit yourselves to God. And when we're thinking we deserve something better than what we're getting, then we're kind of vulnerable to shifting into what we call stinking thinking, right? Resist the devil and he'll flee from you, because Satan wants us to feel offended. And we have a very offended culture now, don't we? Easily offended culture. Everybody's offended and they feel justified in doing what they do. If we do that with our spouse, we will erode our relationship eventually. Draw close to God. What would Jesus do here? People may forget what you said and they may forget what you did, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel. That is a reality in life. And that's why we have to really be careful with the way we treat each other. We can be forgiven, though, all right, and we can forgive. And that's what has to happen, because our whole relationship is about forgiveness, because we're imperfect and we're going to continue to make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't learn from them. Purify our heart. What's the right thing to do? Turn the other cheek, practice the golden rule, do unto others even if they hadn't been done to us. Yeah, that's exactly what we're being instructed to do. Grieve and regret. If you make a mistake, that's okay. You're going to make them. But whatever you do, feel sorry for that. Acknowledge it, take responsibility, own it, recover, ask for forgiveness. Humble ourselves before God. God, what is your will for my life? I made a mess of this. And what's even more beautiful about this particular scripture, it ends by saying this. His promise, wait to be lifted above all the confusion. I've never really noticed this scripture until recently. And basically, when you get into an argument with your spouse, you get all frustrated and confused because you have this reality. They get all frustrated and confused because they have this reality. You mix this reality up, and what comes out of it? Confusion. He says, well, I saw this. This is what I thought happened. Well, no, this is what happened. Well, you did this. Well, you did that. And that confusion causes people to not know what to do. And so either they make it worse or they have to step away from each other. And what this scripture is saying, wait to be lifted up above the confusion, because God will do that if you submit to him. That's really what we're called to do. We may not have the answer immediately, but we will get it eventually. All right, and that's the beauty of stepping away or asking, what do I need to do, God? How do I strengthen myself here and get out of this situation? Well, I was going to talk with you about the crazy cycle, but I think you already know what it is, but I'll briefly go through it. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Haven't y'all been through that before, about the crazy cycle in couples? Okay, so basically it says, here's some positive actions we can take. I'm sorry, I skipped over that. It says, how do we, whoops. Oh, I didn't, hold on. I'm getting lost a little bit here. I'm sorry, folks. There is a great scripture that I wanted to read you before I move on about, here are some positive actions that we can take. Sorry to have to keep moving back and forth. Well, thank you for that. Somebody's helping me out up there. And I do need help. All right, it says in 1 Peter 3, verse 8, finally, all of you, here's some positive solutions we can take to resolve conflicts. And it always, I used to tell couples, because they'd come in with all these problems that they had, and they would go into details about how this person did that and how it made them, how it made this matter worse, and how this person did that and how that made matters worse. And we kept talking about it. And what they were hoping is we could untangle this fish net, this wad of string. Have you ever been fishing and get your line all tangled up and you try to undo it and it just makes it worse? So you can spend a lot of time untangling it if you have that kind of patience. You can just cut it off and start over again. So, and that's what I try to tell couples. Let's do not go into how you've complicated this relationship. Let's talk about how you can simplify it. All right? We need to eliminate certain things and do certain things. And here are some of the positive actions that Jesus is saying we need to add. Be like-minded. Find harmony. Find common ground, not just jump on your differences. That's not going to, you can talk about your differences all day and there's still going to be differences, correct? Yes. Be sympathetic, and even more importantly, be empathetic. Try to understand the other person's point of view, because once you do that, you're seeking first to understand before being understood. Most of us want to be understood first and then try to understand second. It's the reverse. You'll rarely get satisfaction unless you have an incredibly patient spouse if you do that. So seek first to understand, and you can use that in business, and I'll guarantee you it'll take you a long way. If you try to understand where the other person's coming from, and you wait patiently to hear it, so then you can confirm what you may have thought all along, or even you may be the recipient of some other information you just didn't understand to begin with, and then you can really then be able to help them, and then most people will be willing to listen to what you have to say as long as they feel like they've been listened to. Okay, be humble, repay evil with blessing, and you'll receive a blessing. I mean, that's a wonderful guarantee, isn't it? Keep your tongues from spreading evil. That's one of the things that I have never had a problem with bad language, but I know plenty of people who do. And when they get mad, you can really be surprised what comes out of their mouth, and they are too. But obviously, people have problems with that. So if that is an issue, then pray about that, work on it, try to figure out how in the world I can not say something that is going to make matters worse or hurt somebody's faith or lessen my influence on them. Do good. Not only seek peace, but pursue it. Okay. Let me read this now. Okay, it's giving me, good. It's got to give me a timer about how long I've been up here. You know what? I'm going to skip through this one, and I'm going to get to what I wanted you to see before we break again. I appreciate that clock being up there, because that way it gives you plenty of time to do what you need to do, or at least what will help you, I think. So I have given you a handout that you have, or maybe it's been passed out, but it's talking about the best formula. Let me see if I can get to that. The best formula for turning conflicts into closeness. So what I've found is when you're in the middle of a conflict or a difference with your spouse, the best thing to do is back to that point we made in the first one. Start with the person in the mirror. Manage yourself first. Am I making this better or worse? It's hard to reflect when you're in the middle of a windstorm, isn't it? I mean, but that's exactly what we have to do. Am I making this worse or better? Be aware of your own emotional temperature. Am I mad? Am I hurt? Am I frustrated? And if that is the case, then what's going to happen is we're going to respond from that point of view, that emotional perspective. Remember, thoughts, feelings, actions. And if we don't know what our emotional temperature is, we may respond in a way that is not going to help the situation. This is really hard to do. Just step back, learn how to step back emotionally. I mean, most people want to go into attack mode, don't they, when they feel like they've been wronged. But that's a strength and that's a skill set that we all need to learn, because counting to 10 or whatever you want to call it, turning the other cheek, or that's something that really keeps us from making matters worse. One of the non-accusatory questions, and that may seem a little confusing to you, but sometimes we think we know what the other person meant, and we just need to clarify that, but in a non-accusatory manner, because if we go off half-cocked, believing that we know what they meant to do without finding out, what their intention was, we may head down the wrong road, and that will offend them. Have you ever been misjudged when you really meant this? And the other person assumed the worst and approached you as if you did that? Doesn't that make your blood burn? I mean, it boil. So really what we need to do is ask questions. Now, help me understand this. Now, you're saying that this is what you did. Now, when you said this is how I felt, but I want to understand, what you're intending to do here before we move forward here, because I just want to be clear about what's going on. And I don't want to assume the worst of anything here. People will appreciate you giving them that opportunity, because sometimes when you give somebody a heads up that you're thinking one way about something, they're going to really work hard at clarifying that for you so you don't go there. Most of the time when we argue, we look at our differences first, our disagreements. And just like the solutions we talked about a minute ago, we really need to look at what our common grounds are. Where do we agree about this before we talk about where we don't agree? Because there are lots of things you probably do agree with, and that really will help neutralize the emotions here. The hardest thing, the hardest thing for people to do, but the easiest thing for them to ask is, how can I make this better? I don't like where we are right now, and I'm not exactly sure I know what the answers are, but how can we make this better? How can I make this better for you? Can I tell you what I need? You want to tell me what you need. That just puts everything on pause, and then you start working on things, right? Sometimes a timeout is good, but if you don't have an agreed upon time to reconcile, a timeout may seem like an escape exercise. So when you say, if we keep talking about this, it's only going to make matters worse, can we just stop for now and let's get back together in 2 hours, or get back together in the morning when we had a chance to sleep on it, and make sure you honor that, or those timeout ideas won't work in the future. Anyhow, also, in my opinion, and what I've experienced, and as I shared with you, being the first to make amends, to own your own part of that, goes a long way to having the other person do the same thing. And that is a humble thing to have to do. And you may not even think it's fair. You may think, well, what I did was not half as bad as what she did or what he did. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. But if you can do that, if you have the presence of mind to basically own that and say that, it may reset everybody, or the both of you, in the right direction there. Okay, so those are some of the things. Those are some of the things that we can do to turn conflicts into closeness. So what we're going to do in the next 30 minutes or so is we're going to use the breakout questions again. And I really appreciate, I sat around in several groups, and I was amazed at how frank and open people were. And I hope you'll continue to be that way. But there are more questions here than you may be able to answer, but they're still good questions, and I want you to be thinking about them. What are the sources of conflict for you and your spouse? We all have them. Okay, and they're usually the same ones over and over again. We don't usually find new ones. We just may find them in a different area, but they're fundamentally the same ones. Do you believe your conflicts draw you closer or farther apart? And if they do draw you closer, how? And if they draw you farther apart, when does that happen? What are the steps that are often missed with your spouse that are needed for healing? And you may have to refer to this handout, because I gave you a lot of the ways that you could interrupt the process, the downward slide, and start, trying to work towards some kind of reconciliation. And what do you find most difficult about approaching your spouse when frustrated? Okay, now does that mean when you're frustrated or when they're frustrated? And it could mean either one, but what's so difficult about it? And that's helpful to know, because you may be able to bridge that somehow and talk about it. And how has God helped you move past impasses between you both? All right, well, thank you for your attention, and let's break it back out into the groups, and we'll see you in a while. Oh, let me see if I can put those up there. Yeah, there they are.
There we go.
Uh-huh. You see those?
Yep, yep.
All right, we'll leave those up there in case you need a reminder for that.
Perfect. All right,
Okay.
awesome. All right, let's go back to our groups. Same area, same group.
Yeah.